Hi everybody. This is the last chapter that we're going to cover for this next exam. This is chapter 12, Creditors' Rights and Bankruptcy. And there's a lot of parts to this particular chapter, but I'm actually only going to cover some basic things that I think it's very important that you understand when you are finished with this course. So if you pay close attention to just a few slides that I have in this, actually this is a relatively short video. So chapter 12 talks about creditors' rights. And the most important part of this chapter is understanding bankruptcy. And I think that's a very important thing. So the first thing we talk about is what type of creditors and credit loans are involved. And I think it's important that you understand that the types of loans that are there. And the book really focuses on three different loans that are most important. The first is called a term loan. A term loan is a specific amount that's loaned and it's repaid by a specific date. We call that a maturity date, and that's due through installments. Those are typically what most of us experience. Things like a car loan, a mortgage payment, those loans are repaid over a period of time. Sometimes when it comes to mortgages, 30 years with interest. One of the fun facts, so to speak, of a term loan that's kind of weird and people don't always understand this is in the very beginning of your payments on a loan like that, you're paying pretty much mostly your interest. You're not really paying on the principal, which is the amount that you borrowed. This is why it's not uncommon to see people who have owned a home for maybe 10 years and they'll look and see what the payoff is if they decide to sell the house. And they'll realize that they still owe almost as much as they borrowed. And they're like, I don't understand that. I've been paying $1,000 a month for 10 years. You'd think I'd owe quite a bit less. But the reason they do that is because they're front loading the interest. The banks do that on purpose because they want to get the interest in first, knowing that more than likely you're going to sell that house before you get to 30 years. So they want to get their interest in their pocket first. And then when you go to sell the house, then you can pay off what you originally owed on the house. So cars do the same thing, although cars depreciate even worse than houses typically do. And so that can be even more of an expensive thing. So that's how term loans work. A revolving loan is a loan or a credit line that has flexibility in how much is taken out and when it's paid back. My company did that for many, many years and they continue to do that in times of crisis like what we're experiencing with the COVID-19 crisis. Companies will reach out to their banks that they have good standing with and will get a credit up to a certain amount of money based on the collateral that they have, buildings and other assets. And the company will give them a line of credit, which will allow them to write checks against that line of credit to be able to pay things like right now with the close down that we're going on, actually even pay payroll. So that's how a revolving loan works. And then we have secured loans. They require full collateral on something so you can get a lien against your house. So let's say you have a home and you've owned your home for quite a few years and you decide you want to get a new car. You might decide to not get a car loan because car loans can be quite expensive, particularly in the interest rates. So you might find that getting like a home equity loan to buy a car, or getting a home equity loan to do construction or build a deck or redo a bathroom or whatever, those are secured loans because the bank looks and says, okay, your house is worth X amount of money and you only owe less than that. So that gives us some leeway to collect that money. So if you should default on the loan, when you sell your house, you have to pay that loan off. That's called a secured loan. In those, they do use some terms in security agreements, any kind of loan agreement. They will talk about they'll use terms like the parties that are involved. That's the lender and the lendee. So it defines the debtor, or an obligor is what they call that. There's a granting clause, so it must be signed, and there has to be, all of the information needs to be spelled out in the clause. A description of what the collateral is. So what is actually the collateral that you're putting up that you can lose? We see that in pawn shops. Pawn shops will sometimes give loans. So it's not always about selling and buying stuff, but sometimes people will come in with something of value and they'll get a loan from the pawn shop in cash, and the pawn shop will hold that collateral for 30 days or 3 months or whatever the agreement is. And once that time period has ended, the original owner can either go back and buy back their item, or if they default on it, then it goes up for sale. So that's a description of the collateral. After acquired property, in addition to or replacement of a current owned asset. So what's the property? What's the value of that property? What are the proceeds if collateral is sold, leased, or exchanged? What are the proceeds? What are the obligations as the debtor? So what are you obligated to pay? And then even cross collateralization, when you get people who co-pay for loans and things like that, they're also liable as well. The crux of this chapter, after we talk about the loans and lending, is really about bankruptcy. Oftentimes we think bankruptcy can be an easy way out, and many times during financial crisis, debtors will feel that bankruptcy is an easy way out. I will assure you, as a future business owner and even on a personal level, that bankruptcy should always, always be your last option. Bankruptcy has a long-term impact on your credit, your ability for your business to get credit. And so I really would encourage you to meet with a good accountant and a good lawyer before you would ever declare bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is broken down in several different categories, and you can see it here on your screen. Chapter 11 is a reorganization bankruptcy. In a reorganization, it means that the company doesn't necessarily want to close its door forever, but that it has so much credit that it's owed at this point that they need to restructure the credit or restructure the loans that they have. And so they will, the company leaders and legal representatives and bank representatives, typically or lender representatives, will get together and they will come up with a game plan to refinance and to restructure its debts so that the business can operate. A really good local example of that was a number of years ago, the store Boscov's went through that. Boscov's was owned by a chain company that basically mismanaged them and ran them into the ground somewhat. They were in big trouble and they temporarily closed all of their stores. The Boscov family actually came back in and bought the stores back because they didn't want it to go under, and they restructured their credit and then they relaunched. And now Boscov's is doing actually very well. They paid all of their creditors off, and the company is solvent again. So that's a reorganization, or Chapter 11. Chapter 7 is liquidation. That's when they bring in a trustee and they're like, we're done. Company's going to close. We're out of business. And they literally sell everything they can. Whatever is in stock, whatever items are in stock, they sell off at a reduced rate. They will sell any asset that the company has, and they will pay off as much as they can the creditors based on, a pecking order. So if you remember, we did a video or a lecture not long ago where we talked about, preferred stockholders get their money first, and then common stockholders, and then creditors, and then employees. That there's a pecking order as to how they get paid off. The book talks about voluntary bankruptcy. That's when a company chooses to file it on their own. And then there's involuntary bankruptcy, where creditors step in and force the company to declare bankruptcy so they can get some of their money back. By the way, in these situations, typically, especially in Chapter 7 or involuntary bankruptcy, the creditors do get some of their money back, but most of the time they don't get all of their money back, so they also take a loss. So your creditors really are motivated to try to not let you do bankruptcy. They'd rather set up a new payment plan and try to get all of their money back, because once it goes to bankruptcy, they know that they're going to also lose assets. And so what's the cost of bankruptcy? Attorneys and professional fees, $100,000 to $250,000 for a small business. So they're going to take their cut right from the very beginning. Welcome to the world of law. There's obviously damage to your reputation. So, even if a company closes and then you decide to open up a new business, people are going to know you were the former owner of this company that went bankrupt. So that really hurts you. There's a significant reduction in the access to further funding. So companies and banks and lending institutions are more afraid to loan you money. And obviously it damages and destroys your credit. When you do this on a personal level, if you declare bankruptcy where you're protected from the creditors, it's usually somewhere between 7 and 10 years that you're not even able to obtain a credit card. And many of you say, well, I can operate just working on cash. I don't need a credit card. But remember that credit cards are necessary for even some basic things like renting a hotel room or renting a car. Any of the kind of things that you would do with travel, you need a credit card. You won't be able to buy things online. So it's very damaging. So again, when we talk about bankruptcy, whether it's in a business or personal, you want to do your best to try to avoid it as much as possible. That's pretty much it for chapter 12. And this will be it for the series of videos that I'm doing for this particular semester. Again, I hope you're doing well, and we will see you soon. This exam, the final exam, by the way, will be including chapters 9, 10, 11, and 12 because it's a consolidated exam because of the shortened semester. So be aware of that, chapters 9, 10, 11, and 12. Take care, guys. Hope you're doing well. Bye-bye.